Well, the time has come. You've saved the nest egg, you've done everything right. Now it is time to purchase a pre-owned Aston Martin. And you're looking through the classifieds, trying to find the right vehicle that's going to go in your garage and ultimately become a part of your family. Well, here's the thing. Buying hand-built English, artisanally made, crafted vehicles isn't so cut and dry. And there's a lot of things you may not know. Things that ultimately may make your ownership experience with Aston Martin a lot better. So I'm going to give you guys a crash course on all the little things that you have to look for so that when you actually do get your Aston Martin, it's everything that you hope for and becomes your dream car. Alright, so before we even start off, there are a couple of documents that are incredibly important, and you have to have these with pretty much anything you look at. Without them, you could be missing out on a lot of different things. First and foremost, we have a vehicle's configuration and breakdown. Any vehicle that's sold through an Aston Martin dealership will have a comprehensive list of everything that goes into this car. So, essentially we'll know how the vehicle was originally configured, what options it had. Again, something to remember is on a vehicle such as a DB9, there could be over 60, 80, maybe even $100,000 Canadian in options on that vehicle. And without knowing specifically what we're getting into, a third-party dealership could advertise fully loaded, and we would never really know. So understanding the vehicle configuration, vital. The next thing that's really important is the actual service history on the car. So service histories can only be, again, got through actual authorized Aston Martin stores. And with this, it shows a comprehensive list of everything that's gone on with this vehicle over its entire life. So I can look through this history pretty quickly, even as a salesperson, and see if there's anything in there that stands out to me. So as an example, if there was a really expensive service that was done on the engine, perhaps there's something there, a story that we don't know about that we need to understand fully. And obviously, when they do come through an authorized Aston Martin dealership, a factory-trained technician has to do a full 150-point inspection on the car to make sure it's perfect. Now, the last thing, and probably the most important thing to consider, is getting a car-proof history report or Carfax report. One of these is vital because it'll tell us everything with the vehicle with regards to the history. So, as an example, if the vehicle's been in a $20,000 accident, we want to know everything to do with that accident and explicitly where the accident happened. In most cases, Aston Martin stores won't even touch vehicles that have had accidents because this typically does lead to a lesser ownership experience. So the next step, which is vital in your decision-making process, is having the vehicle properly inspected and looked over by an authorized Aston Martin facility. We go through a 150-point inspection with every vehicle that we select to sell at our dealership, so we know exactly what we're getting into. And in addition to that, that's carried out by an actual Aston Martin factory-trained technician. In the case of Henry, he actually moved here from Hong Kong, where he previously worked at Aston Martin Hong Kong. So getting a factory-trained technician is a very big deal. These guys are few and far between, and making sure that they're the ones to look at the vehicle is the ultimate in making sure you get the right Aston. So another thing to consider when you're looking for an Aston Martin, a lot of these customers who previously owned the car, because of their high net worth, a lot of the time when low-speed accidents occur, what the customer tends to do is they may potentially have their own individual body shop do the repair work for them. And then it wouldn't show up on a car proof. So there are a couple measures that I can show you underneath the hood of the car to check out for and just look for and be cautious of. And if you feel those, then you may potentially have a vehicle that has had a low-speed claim or a low-speed collision that was privately repaired. Now, the front hoods on these cars on this generation of DB9 and Vantage are all a single piece of aluminum. So in most cases, if there's any damage to that front hood, the whole piece has to be replaced. So this section here isn't usually one that you're going to notice this on. It usually be on the inseams of the front hood on both sides. So what I would do is just run your finger along the inseam. And what you'll do is you'll feel if there's anywhere where any tape lines where potentially they would have had tape when they resprayed the car. And you'll feel it. It'll feel, if you do have it on a car, it'll feel sort of like a little bit uneven and coarse. You can feel it here. You can also feel it on the inseam of the door jamb for the driver's side. Just feel through there. But remember that the driver's side door may have also some excess wear, potentially if the person opened the door into something. Another thing worth mentioning, just to keep in mind, a lot of these Aston Martins accumulate very, very low kilometers. And it is common with the 6-liter V12, if the car's been sitting for a long time and hasn't been driven, on its first or second occasion, the vehicle may have a misfire, a random misfire, and then in turn the check engine light will come on in the vehicle. This is not something to worry about. It is something that's common with the cars. When you drive the vehicle consistently, it will go away, but it can be alarming when the check engine light comes on. One thing though that is worth noting is if you find a vehicle that does have that, it may also be susceptible to carbon buildup inside of the engine. So there are certain driving procedures that you have to take when you have that vehicle afterwards to make sure that the engine is properly reworn in. And when you do those, you'll be enjoying your car for years afterwards. So we're driving a 2009 Aston Martin V8 Vantage that we have in current inventory at Aston Martin, Uptown, Toronto. Now, test driving a vehicle is another very, very important part of the process in purchasing an Aston Martin. And you really should test drive it before purchasing. Now, having said that, because these vehicles are hand-built, a lot of dealerships require some form of commitment prior to actually going out for a drive in the vehicle. So that could be setting up a deal in place with an offer subject to test drive. And usually once the dealership has that form of commitment in place, they'll have no problem bringing you out for a drive in the car. Once you are actually, in fact, out driving the vehicle, there's a couple things to look for. First and foremost, when you're driving the car, you want to feel if the vehicle pulls left or right. I mean, this could be an indication that the vehicle requires an alignment with the car, or it could, on the flip side, be that the vehicle's had very serious structural damage that might be worth consideration. Another couple things that you want to look for when you're driving the vehicle, listen for sounds. Do you hear any rubbing or knocking against anything? Some of these can be, I mean, in the case of the leather, it can be very common for leather to rub on other leather, but in the case of mechanical components, that could also cost you quite an arm and a leg in the long run. With a lot of these earlier Vantages, it's very important to understand that the transmission on these is not a conventional automatic transmission. Sport shifts, they drive like a manual transmission that's being actuated automatically. That being the case, they do drive very, very differently, and you do oftentimes have to let up off of the accelerator between gears. It is imperative, however, that you have your dealership measure the amount of clutch life left on your transmission on your sport shift, because the replacement cost on a new sport shift transmission can be very expensive. Another thing worth note is Aston Martins have these beautiful leather interiors made by a Scottish tannery, Bridge of Weir Leathers. Fantastic leather on the inside of our cars, which is well known. But some of the Caithness leather material that they use can be subject to shrinking over time if the leather interiors aren't properly treated with leather treatments. And that oftentimes is the case with a lot of older Aston Martins. So this can be an expensive replacement cost, and you'll notice that leather shrinkage at the very top of the dashboard, and in certain Vantage and DBS models also on the leather that sits on the top of the rear of the deck lid. Remember that when you're driving it, feel out the brakes, give it a couple times where you modulate them, and really start to feel what's left on the pad life. Pads and rotors on an Aston Martin, as you can imagine, is a very, very expensive thing because Aston Martin uses performance braking, really the best in the business. The last thing to note are all the little things that come with Aston Martins. When they delivered these cars from factory, multiple model years came with little details like pens that are inside of the center console. Stuff like this. You want to make sure that you get that with the vehicle, because replacing something like this could cost $600–700. it's a heck of a lot easier when it comes with the car from its last owner. And a lot of third-party dealerships, I find that when the cars come in stock, those little extras when the staff find out about them go missing. All right, so you've selected your vehicle, you've gone through the vehicle service history, you've checked everything out underneath the hood, and you're pretty much there at the final stage. Now it's time for one last thing before you actually make the decision to buy the car, and that is to check out the keys. Every Aston Martin is supposed to come with 2 keys, a valet key and also what we like to call a jewelry key. The jewelry key is really special. Aston Martin calls these ECUs, or emotional control unit. It's made of a 301 stainless steel with a sapphire glass tip. Now, because these don't have a keyring attachment to them, they are very prone to being dropped by existing owners. So what I'm getting at is check it out and make sure that the sapphire on the tip hasn't chipped or cracked from being dropped, and also make sure that it actually comes with one of these, because a lot of owners like to keep them as a memento of the Aston Martin that they used to own. But as long as your car has 2 of them, or the dealership is willing to pay the close to $2,000 replacement cost on a new sapphire ECU, then you're all set. Thanks guys for watching. We'll see you on the next one. And remember, if you have any questions at all about buying a pre-owned Aston Martin or suggestions for one of our future episodes, feel free to comment below. We'd love to hear your feedback. Thanks guys. Cheers.